Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. In the end, it was done in the basement. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Wyoming, purged from Republican leadership this morning, just after 9 a.m., for the unforgivable sin of refusing to lie about the last Republican president's attempts to destroy America's tradition of peaceful transfer of power. It was done in the basement in the most cowardly way imaginable, with a voice vote. They did a voice vote because they were afraid of their votes being on the record. And they did not do a secret ballot because they were afraid they might not win the vote. So now there is no written record of how the Republican members of the House voted. It was not in public, but as I mentioned, in the auditorium of the Capitol basement, and it was done in 20 minutes or so. New York Times reporting that some members missed the vote because they were arriving to the meeting when it broke up. It all happened so quickly. Now, Congresswoman Liz Cheney has placed herself now outside the Trump movement that has enveloped the Republican Party. Although, remember, the main way she has set herself outside of the movement is just by continuing to say the simple truth that much of the party agreed upon in the hours after the violent mob stormed the Capitol, chanting "Hang Mike Pence" and trying to install the loser of the election over the winner against the will of the American people.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. These facts require immediate action by President Trump. Accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term.
The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president. And having that belief was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest megaphone on planet Earth.
God, but that's all in the past now. I mean, we're off that now. That was, what was that? I don't know, 10 years ago? 2 months, something. Everyone now bends the knee down in Mar-a-Lago. Republicans are focused on the future, which is taking back power however they can, by means democratic and not. And Congresswoman Liz Cheney is now an inconvenient roadblock to that goal. There was some gloating after the vote by some of the more MAGA-y members, including this truly classic and indeed inscrutable mission accomplished post from Congressman Matt Rosendale. That, of course, is the mission accomplished President George W. Bush banner, the one that he used when he announced the Iraq war was basically done, and it was like years and years from being done. Thousands of Americans lost their lives, tens of thousands of Iraqis after he appeared on that flight deck. In fact, when he tweeted that, I spent a full 15 minutes wondering, does he know what happened here? Why would he use that image? Is this a Iraq war thing about the Cheneys and the neoconservatives? Anyway, the question becomes, what now? Line has been drawn about what will and will not be tolerated in this Republican Party in the year of our Lord 2021. Remember, the Republican Party constitutes exactly one half of the viable American political coalitions, one half in our democracy, and this is the decision they have made about who will lead them and who will not. Now, there are people within the Republican coalition, I think, lobbyists and staffers and apparatchiks and elected members and voters who are aghast at what is happening. Congresswoman Cheney herself, but there's been a long line of others who have spoken out against Trumpism. Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, who voted to impeach Trump and stood by Liz Cheney and is still serving. There were Senators Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, both of whom decided to retire rather than serve in Trump's Republican Party. More than 100 Republicans, including some former elected officials, prominent ones you'd recognize, have threatened to form a third party. But here's the problem with all this, and it's just a very simple calculation about the viability of the Republican Party and preserving it and its connection to power over American life above all else, above principles or any other calculation. That's what's going on in the minds here. And the person who I have to say has come to articulate that most honestly and forthrightly is Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. I mean, Graham's politics, to the extent he has them, probably line up with Cheney in an ideological sense a lot more than he does with either Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York or Donald Trump. Graham is from the Cheney wing of the Republican Party, right? But he was very clear about his own calculation. He said this on Tuesday, quote, and you got to read this to understand what's happening here. I think it would be a disaster for the Republican Party if we just didn't acknowledge the fact that Donald Trump's the most popular person in the party. If you tried to run him out of the party, he'd take half the party with him. I think Graham's right, right? They know that Trump could destroy them, their electoral viability, their proximity to power, and all that brings. And power is what they worship above all else, is what they are in pursuit of. In an exclusive interview with our own Savannah Guthrie today, Congresswoman Liz Cheney embraced her role as the leader of the new, this iteration of the anti-Trump opposition within the Republican Party.
Are you the leader of the opposition in exile right now in the Republican Party?
I intend to be the leader, one of the leaders in a fight to help to restore our party, in a fight to bring our party back to substance and principles, and in a fight to make clear that we won't participate in a really dangerous effort that's underway.
A lot of people frame this as a battle for the soul of the Republican Party.
This is the, I think, opening salvo in that battle. And it's a battle we have to win because it's not just about the Republican Party. It's about the country.
The Trump political team is actively looking to coalesce around a primary challenger to you. What is your message to them?
Bring it on.
Again, the bring it on thing, are we hearkening back to Bush on purpose here? Remember when he said that? The recent history of the Republican Party is not great. Anyway, the question for Liz Cheney, for Adam Kinzinger, for Jeff Flake, for all the never-Trumpers is, okay, so what are you willing to do about what you say is an existential threat to American democracy? The only thing that will get the attention of Republicans as a sort of collective, right, the party, the establishment that wants to stay in power, the only thing that gets attention will be credible threats to their political power, and credible threats to political power come via losing elections. We all know the score here, right? It's clear the base of the Republican Party voters are overwhelmingly on board with the anti-democratic Trump forces. But, on the other hand, political power in this country is determined by very small margins, as we saw in Georgia, where the entire control of the U.S. Senate turned on two narrow upset victories. It's the very same reason Republicans are pushing through all this voter suppression legislation at a state level. 30,000 votes here, 100,000 votes here. It all adds up. The margin in Georgia was 11,000 votes. The power the people in the Liz Cheney camp have is that slice, that margin. They clearly are not a majority of Republicans, but there is some slice of them. Then the question becomes, will they use that power to hurt the electoral prospects of Republicans who are rushing to undermine American democracy, to bring them to defeat? Because if they do not, then nothing will change.